strategic planning later in the event. Betsy has her eyes like that, I'm like, what's going on? But I see the video behind me and over there, so now I'm really clear on what's happening here.
Thinking we didn't have
Yeah.
that.
Okay, if we can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we can get a approval of the agenda, Mr. Cook, please.
Before we approve the agenda, there was one item that got accidentally deleted, and that's a closed session for the purpose of negotiation. And can we put that in just before action items?
Correct, yeah. So that will be...
Or I make a motion to put that in instead of action items.
Okay, and do we have support?
Support.
We have lots of support, recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Beaudoin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to approve the agenda as amended, 6-0. We will have our first opportunity for comments from the audience. The board respectfully requests that any individual wishing to speak to the board provide their name, address, any organization they represent, keep their comments to the allotted time, which is 3 minutes, and refrain from directing comments to individual members of the board, district employees, or members of the audience. If anybody has any comments, there are some green cards on the table. You can just hand them forward, and Mr. Smith isn't here, so Mr. Mena would take those. Is there any comments from audience members this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we will move. Oh.
Real quick, if somebody comes in late, the published agenda says 7:30 start time.
Oh, it does? Oh, thanks for pointing that out, Dan. If someone comes in late, I'll make an announcement, but yes, thank you. We will be sure to let them have an opportunity.
I doubt it'll happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I appreciate your catching that. We will move on to the consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes. This evening we have 2 minutes to approve, the regular meeting minutes of June 15th, 2023, and the closed session minutes of June 15th, 2023. If I can get a motion for the recommendation.
Support. Oh, go ahead.
We have fast people tonight. Recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Beaudoin. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next we have donations, and I will turn that over to Mr. Meinke. We have the Novi Woods PTO donation this evening.
Thank you. The district is in receipt of a donation from the Novi Woods PTO. The donation in the amount of $12,529 they raised all year. They would like to dedicate these funds for the outdoor learning space known as the Nest at the Woods Outdoor Learning Space so that they can have a sunshade. And so they raised a lot of money this year. So the recommendation is that the board accept the donation as presented with appreciation.
Mrs. Roney?
That the Novi Community School Board of Education accept the donation as presented with appreciation and thanks.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Roney and supported by Mr. Cook. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Like many of the things that happen in our district, a lot of this should come through the board for final design approval and stuff like that. Is this going to happen that way?
This is a singular purchase more than a design as it is. So typically, goods and services, when you're talking about a threshold, anything over that 22,500 limit is going to absolutely come before the board. This is coming before the board because of the policy on donations, but this particular project doesn't really involve any design other than it's really purchasing a sunshade, and then they do have 3 poles. I think it's a triangular shape that they have to attach it to. But it's a good point that in the event that we were to be doing some sort of construction or things like that, then yes, it should come before the board, particularly at that 99% of the time any kind of construction is going to be over that threshold anyway, so you should be seeing those documents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
It's not really questions. I mean, it's a really nice, I don't know if anybody's been to the Nest. It's really, it's off the library. Kids can go out there and read, and such like that. And it's much needed because it does get pretty hot. in the beginning and the end of school, so.
I think it's nice.
It's great, I'm so glad they raised it that quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's nice that the PTO had a vision for what they could do to, offer the school something that was gonna be used by all the kids and the staff. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And then based on our amended agenda, we will go into closed session just briefly. I don't anticipate it'll take too long. And if I can get a motion for the closed session, Mr. Cook?
I move that the Novi Community School Board of Community Schools Board of Education move into closed sessions for the purpose of contract negotiation.
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Roney. Roll call, please, Mr. Mena?
Trustee Coleman,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
trustee Mena, yes, trustee Mishner,
Yes.
trustee Roney,
Yes.
trustee Wesson.
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. So we will be gone just for probably 10 minutes at the most, and then we'll come back and finish up with our action items. We will go in your office, is that okay, or do you want us to go in?
Either, probably in this one.
Okay.
It's open, do you want to make copies? It was nice, but I can make a copy.
Yeah, just, if you just make a
Yeah,
copy
just,
of
yeah,
the
don't
original
kill
and
the whole
then,
tree.
yeah, that
I
would be
will.
great. Okay.
Oh, because we can see each other
Because
again
it
and again.
bounces, many,
And then it
years.
goes- Yeah. I don't know. That's fine.
Oh, you don't wanna see yourself?
Did you just
No,
do
it's
it?
just, it's been doing those layers.
Oh, now
the
they
way
are,
that you-
now they're all on.
Okay. I think they get it.
Okay, we are back from our closed session, so, we're gonna move on to our action items. We have 4 action items, and then as one of our audience members pointed out, that on our agenda tonight, unfortunately, it's at 7:30, and so we will open it back up to any new members if they have, of the audience, if they have any comments. So, we'll start with personnel report A, Mr. Micah.
Thank you so much. On behalf of Dr. Carino, the Assistant Superintendent of Talent Management and Development, the consideration for you tonight, we have new hires. Colin Cross, an ELA Social Studies teacher at the middle school. Marie Hines, an ELA teacher at the high school. Ritsu Shudo, who is a Japanese teacher at the high school. Sophia Williams, an ELA teacher at the middle school. As for the NEA, for the ADNU, we had some position changes. Jackie Bovoyich, Administrative Assistant. Kaylee Daring, Administrative Assistant at Central Enrollment. Mary DePotter, Administrative Assistant at ESB. Amal El-Haj, as Secretary at Special Education. Zachary Martinez, Administrative Assistant at ESB. For NESPA, we have Casey Healy, the Community Education Assistant at the ECEC. We have retirements and resignations for the NEA. Math interventionist at Orchard Hills, Lauren Carlini. We have second grade teacher Sherry Grissinger. Special ed teacher at the high school, Kelsey Masserant, and special ed teacher at the high school, Jody Sakaitis. And then also at preschool, we have a teacher, Carrie Ann Storm, who is also resigning, sorry.
Thank you. If we can get a motion for Mr. Mishner?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mishner and supported by Mr. Cook. Do we have any questions or comments? I know that Dr. Carino is not here. I'm sure she's working diligently behind the scenes with her team to staff the district for the new year.
So
We didn't, I apologize, we did not invite the candidates to tonight's session due to the work session setup, but they will be invited to our board meeting, our first board meeting in August, so that they can be introduced to the board.
Great. So we will have an opportunity to welcome all of our new hires, and certainly we wish the retirees and the staff who have moved on in their careers well. So
I noticed our varsity girls basketball coach, not here, but she, my understanding is she's gonna continue to coach.
I don't have that answer, but I can
That's what I
find it.
heard. So let me share that with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that.
alrighty. Any other questions or comments? No, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have our personnel report B, which is, hold on, I'm just struggling here. Which is the superintendent contract. On July 14th, 2022, the Novi Community School District Board of Education approved a resolution entering into a contract with Mr. Ben Micah to engage his services as superintendent beginning July 15th, 2022. Recently, the Novi Community School District Board of Education has assembled the ad hoc superintendent contract subcommittee that met and reviewed Superintendent Micah's contract. The subcommittee is recommending that our board approve an amended contract that continues Mr. Micah's service to the district. The Board of Education has the opportunity to review the superintendent contract. We had the opportunity to review the superintendent contract with Mr. Micah, and tonight this comes to the board for approval. So if I may get a motion for the recommendation?
So moved.
Mrs. Beaudoin, with support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Beaudoin and supported by Mr. Cook. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay.
Actually, I will.
Okay.
I will say something about the negotiation. It's nice to see that the alignment of the wages and any potential increases between all the other groups and the superintendent, and from what I understand, it was Ben's idea to do that, and it just adds to that he's not out there on a ship himself, he's there with everybody else, and it's a group going together, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook, I would agree, and thank you for your year of service, and we look forward to many more.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We will move on to approval of policies. And I am just going to turn this over to Mr. Micah.
Okay. The Governance and Policy Advisory Committee met several times over the past few months. We've been talking about a variety of the policy implementations. At our last board meeting, the board approved a number of the policies. Tonight, we have the second opportunity for conversation, but also approval of the 1000 series and the 2000 series, as well as policy 5202 and policy 5207. Those came for information and discussion at the last board meeting on June 15th. I will make note that the policies are listed there for your reference, and I say policies, they're also primarily in the 2000 series bylaws. We had some just requests for policy 2501 and policy 2502 for some further discussion about a couple things that are in those, and so it was recommended that we address those at a later committee of the whole. There were also two suggestions by Trustee Mishner, both that dealt with number one on one of the policies to include the name of the Board of Education in, which I think would require a brief discussion, if that would be up to the board to decide. And then we also had the conversation in the second way, or the second item, which was, help me out, Mr. Mishner, the second blue.
The second one was relating to carpool.
In the carpooling, actually not taking the option for that, which would allow people to carpool but wouldn't seemingly require it. So those are there for your consideration this evening, and then it would simply be, I think, on the ones that you're considering tonight, particularly the ones that had those two additional comments. If the board wanted to consider those, they could do that, and we could make those adjustments, and you could approve them in that way.
Great. So I will just for the sake of logistics and making this straightforward, we'll just ask for a motion for the recommendation. And then once that's approved and supported, we'll give Mr. Mishner a chance to speak on those two things and share his thoughts. And if there's no objections, then we can just approve all of this as a whole with the exception of 2501 and 2502. And as soon as we get back to at the end of the summer break, if you will, we will have a committee meeting of the whole so that we can do a deeper dive into 2501 and 2502. So if I can get a motion for this recommendation, Mr. Mena?
Yeah, I move that the board approve policy series 1000, 5202, 5207, replacing the current policies, and the Troon Law bylaw series 2000 with the exception of 2501 and 2502.
Do we have
Support.
Okay, recommended by Mr. Mena and supported by Mr. Mishner. And so I'll just kind of turn the table over just on those two items, if
Sure.
you just want to share your thoughts, and then if anybody has any questions, we can discuss it, and if no one does, then we'll just take probably a roll call vote, just because it's policy, or no? Doesn't matter, okay.
So the first one was policy 2102. It's really short. It's one sentence. It just says the district's legal name is Novi Community School District. I proposed in an earlier work session, I think we got to admit it, that we should have the Board of Education, the Novi Community School District Board of Education listed, since bylaws really governs the board's operations, not the district. And traditionally in all bylaws, you name the entity that the bylaws apply to, which would actually be the board and not the district. So adding that to that statement is all I'm asking.
So,
Does that make sense?
just for a question,
Yeah.
Are you saying in addition? Can you
Yes,
just read it to
in
us then
addition.
with it on there?
So
Yes.
in a formal motion statement, it would be the district's legal name is the Novi Community School District, and, which operates as the general powers district under Michigan, and the bylaws pertain to the Novi Community School District Board of Education.
So right now it says the bylaws pertain to the Novi Community School District.
It just stops under Michigan law, general powers under Michigan law. So, just say that the board should be under there.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that?
Did that get run by True?
I did, yeah.
And they're,
Danielle had asked me to run that by the attorneys, and they said that's not a problem at all. The way that Mr. Mishner just described it, you know, to be an addition to.
in addition, the bylaws and,
Yep, because the bylaws deal with the board operation, essentially.
Mhm.
Yep.
Would you want me to put that in writing, Danielle? or-
No, it's okay, because I think that we're gonna encapsulate it in here, and then, if it's approved as part of this, then we'll make sure that the
Okay.
policy gets changed
So,
accordingly.
is it already part of the motion that's on the table?
yes, this one is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any concerns with that, I should say, maybe instead of questions? No, it doesn't seem like it. I know that I asked the same question about
Yeah, and-
making sure that it went
and
through
The
legal.
copy, the spreadsheet you sent out had that listed that way.
It did.
Yes.
It's,
So that's-
Okay. Next,
The second one is policy 2305, and this is in section B2A. There's an optional clause that states, when practical, board members will carpool to avoid duplicative mileage reimbursement. I just simply, my rationale for not including that was, I think we would all do what is practical, and I think to put something that is optional, not required, creates some a dubious nature of whether it needs to be done and in what circumstances consider practical. So I think if we just leave it out, I think we'll all exercise that option as it's appropriate for the district. I don't think it needs to be in the bylaws. So that was my thought.
okay. Does anybody have any specific questions about that? I think that's presented that way as well, correct? Was it presented that way on the Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet? Correct,
Yes.
okay. Any concerns about that? I just didn't realize we could get mileage. I didn't even know that was a thing. Oh, there you
It's a
go.
whole new world.
Travel to MASB classes, you can get mileage.
dang, you guys owe me a lot of money.
You don't have to take it if you don't want to.
There's probably a time frame that you're supposed to turn it in,
Again,
so.
Annual basis.
That change was already reflected in,
In the spreadsheet that was provided
Yes.
Yeah.
earlier this week.
just want to make sure.
Any questions? Any concerns? Okay. So, seeing that neither of those things are a concern and we got a little more clarity on that, I think that we're ready for a vote. Would y'all agree? Okay. All in favor? I'm not gonna do a roll call vote, because, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Okay. We will move on to our final action item this evening, which is the Novi Middle School Outdoor Learning Space Approval. Mr. Minkoff.
Thank you. So I know that Justin and Stuart are here. Stu provided some renderings that I'll pass along. As you recall, the state of Michigan awarded, Kelly Breen was instrumental in helping to provide some assistance that we were obtained for outdoor learning spaces. One of the things that came up is that weren't really sure what the middle school space was gonna be looking like. And so when we started with Mr. Baker at the beginning of the year, I don't think that there had been a lot of development or conversation around there. We believe that, and again, I don't want to be quoted as an exact number, but the number is over $200,000. I believe it's closer to $250,000 that the grant for outdoor learning space has been given to the district for that purpose. The bids came in a little above that number, and we did save some money on our outdoor learning spaces at the other buildings through some of the other grants through the NEF. And so the majority of this will be expensed through the grant from the Michigan the state budget for outdoor learning space opportunities. And then also, the district will contribute a small portion of the bond funds to bring the project to fruition. This project will be, as you can see in the renderings, it will be kind of outside the middle school when you pull in the drive off of 11 Mile, and you'll see there's kind of a marsh area that's there. And so there's a sign that's gonna be included that includes some outdoor education pieces, and then there's actually a teaching space there for teachers to take kids out, into that more natural area. Stu, I don't know if you have anything that specifically you wanna add, or Justin, but they're there if you have questions as well about the design or anything that they're doing there, so.
And if anybody has any questions, I'll have you guys kind of just come up here so that we can see you on the screen, so. Does anybody have any questions for them?
I just wanna know how you're gonna get that little green stuff between the bricks.
I was wondering about that too.
First, we'll
What is
get a
that?
motion from Mr. Cook. No.
Is that,
We need a
are we
Yeah.
actually gonna have grass in the
Mr. Mishner,
between?
1 second.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education award the attached contracts in the total amount of $269,000, try again, $269,906 as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Okay, recommended by Mr. Mishner, supported by Mrs. Roney. Now we can have a discussion, sorry. Okay, you go first, Mrs. Modwine.
Will there be grass in between?
So,
Is that the intent here?
no, the intent for these renderings is to show that they're permeable pavers. So it's gonna be more of a water catchment system as opposed to having any kind of drain.
But there won't be like grass to mow on
No, there
these
won't be.
tiles? Because I was kind of wondering if that was just the rendering or,
Yeah, it's just the rendering.
good,
It's cool.
seems like that way to do it.
Mr. Meno?
But I am curious, right, whenever you have a brick like this, it does cause a lot of maintenance if you get weed, seed, grass in there. So what do you do?
So we worked really closely with our consultant, Unilock, that provides the permeable paver bricks. They have a manual, a maintenance manual that we can provide. There will be some maintenance, of course, but they have a very specific way to maintain it, so that way you don't have grass, so you don't have weeds, you don't have any kind of movement of the bricks themselves. The way that they're interlocked is such that you won't be able to move once they're in place. So we can provide that information, especially to Mike Jacob.
Well,
There's like a micro sand you put in it, and it,
Yes,
I mean, it just,
yes.
my son works in landscape, so I know this stuff.
Alright.
Do we have
I
any?
did have a conversation with Mike about that because, for example, we're putting these boulders out here, and I wanted to make sure we had fabric behind them, just these simple things. And his comment was, yep, we do, but weeds will grow anywhere, so,
Oh, yeah.
there'll be maintenance at different
I
pieces.
spend a lot of time helping my neighbors clean that stuff out in their driveways.
Thank
It'll
you.
go anywhere.
Do you have any?
This isn't on a slab though, right?
I'm sorry.
It's not like, on a slab? It's
No, so
just
there's several layers of gravel underneath,
Okay.
so that will help the drainage.
That makes sense.
Mr. Cook, do you have a question?
No, I'm not gonna support this. I do believe it's excessive for what we're getting. I also believe that we should have stayed within the funds that were granted to us rather than going over into bond funds. It wasn't necessarily wanted in the first place by some of the administration over there, but, it's also in an area that only half the school that really has access to. So I won't be supporting this.
Okay, thank you. Do we have, yes, please.
I just wanted to better understand, you said it's in an area that only,
Your school is laid out that this will only be close to the 7th grade section of the school. The 8th grade section is completely on the other side. To get to it and use it is quite a hike from the other side of the school.
it is what it is?
We looked at a number of locations, so
Mhm.
he's not wrong on the physical space
Okay.
location. One of the early places was actually on the opposite side, kind of nestled in, you know, if you think of the middle school, it's got like the spoke wheels, and it was kind of on the bus drop side, and you would have the opposite scenario in that case. There was also a consideration of kind of a, I don't know if, not a boardwalk, but like a bridge out into the wetlands on the far east side of the building, kind of outside by where the new band areas are. And that again would be, so, you know, picking a location was a factor, and they thought this would be the most prominent, that, you know, people would be able to see it when you come in. You know, it's pretty easy to access, but to Mr. Cook's point, it is naturally going to be farther away for, you know, half of the school.
So, explain to me what the difference is between going this route and going to a similar look with a stamped concrete. I understand the drainage, right?
Sure.
But is that a huge issue? Well, just tell us why you couldn't have gotten stamped here on most of these areas.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely could have. I think the idea of the permeable paver system was more, it just lends itself more to a natural kind of space, especially the fact that it's adjacent to the wetlands itself. So it just really kind of enhances that idea of nature and natural setting.
What do you think this will look like 5 years from now?
I hope it looks like it does
I
in
mean-
the renders.
I mean, we're not the first person to use this material, so
Sure.
what have historically we've seen?
You're talking about the permeable pavers
Yeah.
themselves? Yeah, they have a pretty significant warranty on them. So, and I,
Yeah, I worry about the dips, right? You've
sure,
seen that.
absolutely. And we've talked in great detail with our consultant about that to make sure that it doesn't happen. So, and I'll get you all the information you want on that if there's any concern.
How far of a drop is this? It doesn't look significant, but I can see kids just,
Yeah, so there is a code that says that anything over greater than 30 inches will require a railing. So our height is going to be about 24 to 28 inches. So we won't be exceeding that. We wanted to make sure that it felt more of a viewing platform, that the railing didn't kind of encroach on that view.
Do you know offhand what pavers these are? You said unilac permeable pavers, I'm just trying to look at what they are.
Yeah.
If you don't know, that's fine.
There's two types. We're gonna have kind of a lighter gray, and then we'll have a kind of a darker charcoal gray. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact type.
Mr. Misner?
So, question about the funding, so, trustee Cook, you mentioned that some of this was paid for by funds that were acquired through the state, and some of it is coming out of the bond. What is the split on that?
So we can get that exact number. I don't know if Stu has it with him right now, but the NEF has been granted about $400,000. $250,000 was originally slated for this project because of the fact that it was kind of the middle school was the main thrust for the project.
Is that still what was slated? Because that would mean that we're, out of the bond fund, we're just bringing roughly 20 grand?
Part of my comment earlier is I wanna make sure, and the bids were just taken on this last week.
Mhm.
So, but I wanna make sure that we don't misspeak, but I believe the number, I know the original number was 250,000, I believe they still had that amount to put towards it, but, it's
Okay, so if you
a
look-
significant.
If you look in the letter of recommendation, there's a budget summary there.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's, around 392, it says here, so if the award recommendation is 250 or 260-ish, it's about $120,000 that comes out of bond. So about a,
We're only approving 261,000.
Yeah.
I don't know, one of my concerns is, I mean, it just has seating here. You know, like if you wanted to bring a classroom out,
there's not a lot of seating.
Can I ask a question about kind of how far we are in the project? So if indeed there's further questions by the board, or we need some more clarification, and this doesn't get approved this evening, where does that take us? Was the plan to have this done and implemented by the fall? Is it already being prepped, and where are we kind of at with it?
Yeah, the schedule for it was slated for us to begin breaking ground on toward the end of August and having it complete by the end of November. So,
Okay.
but no, the subs are not on contract or anything at this point. We're here for the approval on that. So.
Okay. So if we logistically, our next meeting is like the first week in August, right?
Yeah, you could treat this as information and discussion if you chose to do so. The only caveat is there are some, part of why we couldn't bring it to you before this is because bids were just taken.
Right.
But, the other piece of it is that the state on that money has some stipulations for wanting that spent.
Okay.
You know, I think the deadline is, September something. So the goal was to spend down the funds as soon as possible. But if we meet again in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, can't remember when
I
our
know,
first
what's
meeting
today's
is.
date? Today's the 13th, so yeah, our first meeting on
What does
Tuesday.
that do to
Fourth.
schedule?
As far as the schedule goes, if I can get everybody under contract on it, we're only talking 2 weeks. I think we can find out the construction aspect of it. What would concern me is how that works with the NEF funds and building that out, so.
I mean, happy to do whatever you guys wanna do.
So the total phase in the budget summary box, the total phase 2 budget, that is, how much was budgeted for this project?
I think the bids came in lower than we were expecting.
Right.
So,
So that's what I'm trying to understand. So if the the state grant, was for basically 250,000, and the bids came in at 270,000, we would be adding $20,000 to be able to get this project to come to fruition. So we'd be spending just $20,000 over our state funding, right?
so again, that is in the original stages of planning, I haven't been as intimately involved with the bidding process, so I don't want to tell you an exact number and then have you say, well, that was actually 100,000 or something like that. But I do know that the original amount that they had to allocate towards it was around 250,000. So, I believe that that's accurate, but I don't wanna misspeak is what I'm saying, so.
Fair enough.
So if you feel more comfortable, I know that they were hoping to get the funds expensed. I'm happy to treat this as information and discussion. If you wanna move forward, I can do that and still get the information. It's totally up to how you guys
All
want
right,
to do it.
I'm a little lost here, I'll be honest with you. What is it that we're missing then? What information did you get us?
The only information I would get you is how much of the exact dollar amount, whether it's $19,000,
That's coming out of the bond.
$630 is coming out of the bond fund. I don't have that exact number in front of me.
Okay, because,
Because what he's saying, Willie, is out of the what Jason's saying is out of the 269,906. If it is
250
really
is coming from the
250,
state grant.
then it's only 19,000, but we don't have that exact number about the state grant. And if we want Ben to get that, and he will,
We could have spent some of it at a different place,
gotcha.
right?
Right, yes, so there, obviously the bond funds have money allocated for outdoor learning spaces. The middle school did not have that necessarily as a part of the general scope at the beginning. So while there were monies set aside for other elementary schools, a lot of the, NEF grants and Bosch grants pick some of that up. So what the question is do we want to invest in this? Because there is some skin in the game for the district. The majority will be paid for from the state grant. To get you an exact number will take me less than 24 hours to get it, but I just don't have it in front of me right now.
Yeah, it's, around $20,000 is what would be coming out of the bond, but we've had scope creep in almost every project, and spending is getting ridiculous. Efficiencies are going out the window on a lot of things. Deadlines are being missed. It's just, sooner or later, we're the fiduciaries of this money. And we've gotta make sure we're spending the money wisely, and not just throwing money because we have money. And some of the projects that are going on, it almost looks that way.
So, Justin, is there any, the term escapes me right now, but the term we always put in for overruns in budget, we usually approve with project. The contingency, is there a contingency baked into this amount?
There's not a contingency baked into that amount, that is an outside fund that's usually pulled out of the bond funds onto that, so that's worked through an amendment on it. This is strictly just the construction cost itself.
Okay.
Mrs. Bowen?
Do you have information on about how many students think they can sit in this semicircle here?
So we have sized this to fit 2 or 3 classes. So I don't know, that's probably what, 80 students?
How big is like the diameter approximately?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, do you know how, I'm gonna ask another one you probably don't know, how big are these pavers?
Pavers are 4 by 20, I believe.
Okay, and is this to scale or?
Yes,
Okay. So,
it should be roughly.
Well, there's two different size papers, though.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
the paver design in these renderings are a little bit different. So it's gonna be a herringbone pattern,
oh, but it's 4 by 20 and a herringbone?
4 by 20, yes.
Okay, so that's not, this isn't to scale then, probably, doesn't appear to be, okay. So the other thing I wondered is the, environmental reasoning behind the, permeable pavers makes a lot of sense. But I'm curious in terms of like how much these cost per square foot compared to like normal standard pavers, like how much more are we paying to not have the runoff for this?
Couldn't speak to that off the top of my head. I would have to look into it and have a basis of comparison of what it is that you're trying to compare to. I can tell you this cost per square foot outside of this, not in this meeting, I
Oh,
don't have
okay.
that
I was
information
like,
in
that
front of
would
me,
be
but I
fine.
can definitely get that for you based off of that. I just don't have that kind of information.
Yeah, I mean, I would like that information just to have a sense of how much more we're paying for that portion of it.
I believe when we're budgeting it, I want to say it's $18 a square foot for the paper material itself. But,
Is that installed or?
But no,
Or just for the pavers?
I think that was just the material itself, not for the labor involved.
It seems like the trade-off between this and stamped concrete would be maintenance and how long the structure would be good for, because stamped concrete, once it cracks, I don't know how long you can keep patching it before it needs to be completely repaved. Whereas, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you could replace sections of this if they did need maintenance.
Right.
So maybe upfront cost is a little higher, but maintenance and longevity, lower cost over life of the structure. I guess my overall opinion is, if we were to get something that looks this nice and provides function for the middle school students, if we're putting, 10% or less of the total budget into the project, that seems reasonable to me. The rest of the money's coming from the state. So if we could make that decision tonight, I would be okay voting on it, but if you're not comfortable staying in that margin of error, then, we could always bring it back. That's my opinion.
I agree with that opinion. I think that if we think we're kind of close, obviously not exact, then, although I agree with Mr. Cook in making sure that we're being good fiduciaries, I do also think that it's a small amount that we're putting in, 10%, and the state's putting in 90% to have a nice outdoor space. So,
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
So no, it's okay. Maybe a recommendation would be to approve the contract amount, provided that the district's not paying any more than 10%, is that what you
10%
said?
of the cost.
And then you could, and then if it is in fact over that cost, then we would bring it to the next meeting, and then you could I could have the exact numbers. I don't like saying a number if I don't know the exact, because it could be more, they could have used the money for different design fees. I don't know where that's at in the, I knew that we were gonna pick up some of the cost in bond funds. We did have money set aside for outdoor learning, but to the exact number I can't speak to, so if it's within that margin, then you can vote on it tonight. And then if it's outside of that margin, then we'll bring it back at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Does that work?
And it's a little, like, based on the 250, which I know that you're not, like, swearing to that, it's a little more than, 250 is only 19,000 and 10% is 26,000, so then, I mean,
Right. A little room to.
Would
Yeah.
you like me
Or legal.
to amend the original motion to include that language?
sure,
Okay. Let me find
Can
the.
I ask one more question?
yes.
Do you know what these are made of? Like, what's the material for permeable pavers? Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions,
That's a really
there's
good
still a lot of
question,
pavers here.
Um,
Sorry,
I'll get you the parent, I'll get you all the information.
I'm looking at it online, I just don't see what they're made of, which I just was curious. I mean, it's an interesting concept, I haven't heard this before.
Did you put this in a plan view with the wetlands there?
Yeah, I can get you some more
Can you share that?
views or plans, absolutely.
They almost look like they're like a composite.
Yeah, and I didn't bring with me, but I have samples too I can bring. If you want to take a look at those as well.
That would be great.
Okay, Mr. Commissioner, so I'll let you make an amended motion, and then, if you guys get I'm sure you got some of those questions in your head, and if anybody has any further questions, you can send them to Ben, and he can get that information for you, so that at least you have all the information. So if you're not comfortable voting even on the 10%, because you have questions about the material, then you would just vote this down at this point, is where you as a trustee would be. And I'm not just saying you, I'm saying all of you.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
super clear about what the materials are like more info.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mishra.
Okay, so I move to amend the original motion to strike the words as presented and add the words provided no more than 10% of district funds are used towards the total project amount.
Do we have support on that amendment?
Support.
Okay, recommended by Mr. Mishner and supported by Mr. Mena. Do we have any additional questions before we vote on the amended resolution? No? Okay, seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yay.
Nay.
So motion carries, I gotta do my math here, 4-2. I got two mathematicians here at the table with me. Okay, so the motion carries based on that amended, and then Ben, you'll work with Justin and Stuart to get all the details that everybody would like to see.
Exactly.
Okay?
For sure.
Alrighty, thank you.
Just like that, we're not voting again here, right? We're just voting on.
Nope,
No,
we're done voting.
It's passed. and-
Yep. But I do want to, we did have a student join us.
So out
Yes.
of clarity, so do we need to vote on that was the vote for the amended motion, right? So 4-2 to amend the motion. Now we need to vote on the motion as amended.
Okay,
That's what I thought.
yeah.
Yes.
I think I got confused because people voted against it.
So,
Because I know how the final's gonna land, right? Okay, so 4-2 to amend the motion.
right.
Yes.
And now we're gonna vote on the amended motion.
Good.
Everybody ready?
Yes.
He made the motion and you made the second on that one.
On the original, yes.
On the original.
Yeah,
Okay,
got it?
got it?
Keeping you busy, huh?
Mm-hmm. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
There we go, motion carries, amended motion carries. 4-2. 4-2? I think that Mr. Mena has it over there better than I do.
Got it?
Okay.
He's like scratching all over it.
That's like a really.
Alrighty, back to comments from the audience, because as pointed out by one of our audience community members, that the regular meeting says 7:30, so our student, one of the students has come to join us this evening, which we appreciate.
If anybody has any comments that they would like to share, please fill out a green card. If you're just here to listen to our fun, then that's great too. I see a smile back there, so I think that there's no specific comments from the audience tonight. Okay. We will move on to information and discussion. Tonight, we are gonna do a short work session on strategic planning, and I know that Mr. Meinke is gonna lead us in that endeavor.
Thank you. So, when I started, one of the conversations that I'd had with several board members, also staff, was, you know, what is the situation with the district's current strategic plan? And the strategic plan expired shortly before I started here in Novi. But the previous plan, as some of you that have been on the board a while may remember, there was a strategic planning session, and it was really primarily one day at the middle school. There were about 90 people present, and I'm reading this from notes, so some of you know this better than I. And the idea was that a variety of people would be able to kind of come together, talk about mission, vision, some goals, and that was facilitated by MASB. As we kind of have started to, this past year, really build the team, establish some foundational relationships, build some capacity within our staff, I think it's really important for you as a board to start to establish what are those strategic visions that we're going to start to move towards? And that way I can then take that and really work closely with the staff. So from a big picture perspective, I'd really like to take the time to do this well. This is gonna take more than just a couple months. It's an opportunity for us to not only do surveys, but also include focus groups. We want student voice in the strategic plan. We want our community members' voice in the plan. We want industry and business leaders in the plan. Certainly parents and other staff stakeholders. But ultimately, you as a board are going to be, as the fiduciaries, deciding, what are the goals, what is the mission, the vision, and those types of things. So I'm here to help facilitate, and I wanted to talk a little bit about big picture, the process, and kind of what we're dealing with. And then I have a couple things that I would like to start actually doing activity-wise with you tonight. Just really starting to think strategically about what are those next pieces. What this looks like over time is that when the staff, and I'm working with the staff and our team about how we're executing, towards different goals, and how the board is making approvals on different types of funding and things like that, we can tie that back to our strategic plan. The goal is to come up with something that's actionable, that's not sitting in a binder. I will tell you that most strategic plans are an afterthought, and they sit in a binder on someone's shelf and no one ever looks at them. The goal is to really kind of do an exercise that you as a board feel good about, the community and the staff understand, and we can kind of buy in. And that makes it really a lot easier for us to work with the staff towards some of those strategic initiatives. So I want to talk a little bit about timelines. So there's really 3 major phases that this process ensues, or includes. The first one is really establishing what we call a portrait or a profile. I call it a profile of a graduate. And the profile of the graduate is starting with the end in mind. It's actually, as a team, thinking about what are those competencies or skills that we want the person that leaves us after 13 years of education to have. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. The second phase is really about creating those mission, vision, values, statements that kind of undergird everything that we do. We've had some statements that have been present for a very long time. Interestingly, on some of the old agendas, you'll remember, and even on some of our signs, it says commitment to excellence. That has never been in our plans, and it could have been at some point, but that's not actually part of the mission or vision that we currently have. Not to say that we're not committed to excellence, but just that is interesting how some of those things happen. So we want to examine our current mission, vision, values, see if what is existing needs to be addressed and adjusted, and we'll do some activity around that tonight. Then we're gonna get into, later on in the fall, talking about, goals. You start with your high level, you know, what are the big picture goals that we would have, and, I'm gonna encourage us not to have 25 goals. When you start looking at documents and strategic plans that have 25 goals, I sat on the state of Michigan's, Department of Education's, they called it to be the top 10 and 10. And it was supposed to be this really abbreviated, plan, and it ended up being like 180 pages. And when you get to that point, you're focusing on nothing. So, I'd like us to kind of look at like 4, maybe 5 at the most, kind of goal areas. And then from there, and I'll have some more discussion about this at a later date, but we're gonna be talking about objectives and then strategies and action steps to get to some of those goals. And then how we're going to progress monitor, right? What are the, you know, ways that we're gonna, you know, keep informed and up to date on how we're doing towards those things. So we've talked a lot in concept about some of those things, but I think it'll be really helpful for you as a board and then also us as a district to have, you know, a plan, you know, between 3 to 5 years that we can start to look at and say, this is the direction we're going, and we can kind of all start rowing the boat in the same direction. So, timeline that I'm looking at is I would love to think that we can get this done, prior to Thanksgiving. That would be kind of my initial kind of stab at that, is to say, starting with tonight, and then of course, there'll be a myriad of different sessions from, you know, focus group sessions, surveys, things like that, and then also probably a handful of work sessions that you as a board would work through. I'll be able to help collect some data from our different stakeholder groups, but also having some sessions with them and you in the room together at different times as well. So, that's kind of the high level overview in a nutshell. So I wanted to just talk about that in concept. Does anybody have any questions about the timeline or the process? Or objections to any of that? So,
No, we're not gonna do like a big group in a room for one day, right?
no, it's gonna be a little bit more. I mean, we will have opportunities for the big group. I think you're gonna want, you know, stakeholder input. But, you know, what will more likely be the case is that we might have a couple of those where, you would be invited to hear from different stakeholder groups. But you also will have work sessions where I'll be providing you with data. So here's what, community members said, here's what parents said, here's what students said, and then you will be looking at that to help inform, you know, how that goes and where you wanna go with that, so.
Do you have is the original strategic plan somewhere where we could get a copy to see where we're walking from?
Yeah,
I
we,
don't think we wanna go there, but.
yeah, it's a document, there is a document in an archive. It hasn't really been referenced in multiple years, so I'm not sure many people would even recognize what it is, but we were able to dig it out and find
You know, I
it.
know what we were promised by the MASB, I don't even know if,
I don't think we
I've
ever
never-
finished it.
I don't think it
No.
ever
We've
got finished,
asked
I don't
and it
believe they
never-
ever delivered what they had promised on it, it was, wow.
So was it
Otherwise-
done?
Like the bones
otherwise I'd
behind
use some
it.
colorful
So-
language
So we
to
landed Jason
describe
with
it.
this vision, mission, beliefs, which is kind of what you want to land on, but it's
Uh-huh.
kind of missing all the bones. So it's kind of got the phase 2 in here. Like, that's one of the things I'll struggle with because I actually like this. I mean, I like the equity of opportunity and culture of unity and fostering curiosity and community of well-being. Like, I love those things, and so I'm gonna struggle to find my way out of that into something better. But that's where the focus groups come in, because that's not maybe where we're at, and we can incorporate that into moving into the new world, if you will. Like, you know, technology changes, and we have kiddos who are gonna go to college, and we have kiddos who are gonna do trade school, and we have kiddos who are gonna go into the workforce and into the military. And just as Ben pointed out, I think that the portrait of a graduate. So going backwards, like I'm looking at that document that really was never completed, as Mr. Mena pointed out. Like, this part is done,
So-
but the inner workings never really, like, we never really got from the MASB.
So that's where the vision,
bow
mission,
on it.
beliefs came from, the last strategic
work
plan?
session.
Yes.
Ah,
yes.
Okay, and then you did that in conjunction with MASB?
They
MASB
facilitated it,
They facilitated, okay.
yes.
And that's pretty much as far as it got, those three parts?
Yep.
Okay. So it never really filtered into
And there
like
was some goals that were out of it, but it
building
really
planning,
didn't
hiring,
ever,
curriculum.
We got some sample documents of what they had produced in other districts. And, but we never got a final document. I don't recall seeing a
No,
final
we never
document,
got one.
right, from them, so. But we did end up with this came out of this one-day session.
So I would say, to preface it, my goal would be is to help facilitate, and I've done this before. I think there's an opportunity for us to really think strategically as a team. You think about the governance team, which includes the board and the superintendent, having the opportunity to think strategically together about, over the course of several months versus trying to one day get everybody to think about these deep, things that impact our work in meaningful ways. So my goal would be to be able to facilitate a process where there's a lot of voice in the data that allows you to make some good decisions. But to Danielle's point, if these are where we land for at least this part, the charge is not necessarily that we have to change these, but it is gonna be important to review them and to create some, I would say, articulation documents that we can use to share what this vision is and really make it come alive versus just seeing it in, one document sitting in a binder. But the strategic plan will take us well beyond this, so this will be the foundational piece, and we'll build some marketing pieces with those things and all of that. But there's also going to be then goals that come, specifically goals that come to where are we going strategically. I mean, we've only started scratching the surface. Mr. Cook and I have talked a lot about AI. We've talked about that in the curriculum committee. That's gonna be something that we're gonna need to deal with, and I think it's gonna be important that we get ahead of it and we are leading and not just following in some of those areas. And so that's one area that clearly we don't really have a very strategic goal around. We've talked about, particularly historically underserved populations of our students. We don't have a stated goal, right, that we have our My Kit, but that process is not an effective process in terms of getting to, what are we doing as a team, and we're helping our staff get the support they need to rise to meet those goals.
And then in general principle, how far does this, where does the strategic planning stop at the board level and then become administrative?
So that's
How
part of
far
what I'm
down
gonna
does
help
it
you,
go?
yeah, so that'll be part of what I help you with. So the goals and, I would say a lot of the, kind of the big picture, like what we're looking for, and we call it the what, is gonna come from the board. But the strategic plan, then I will be working with our team to also have activities that are gonna be actionable strategies. I'm not going to expect necessarily that the 7 of you are gonna come with specific strategies. I mean, you may have some, and that's fine. But the idea would be that our team would be working in conjunction, right? To then come back to those sessions and say, you guys had said these are the goals. Here are some strategies and some suggested activities that we would like to really engage to try and move the needle in those areas.
I think it sounds great. So I'm seeing this is phase 2, but that's really all we have right now. So phase 1 is the portrait of the graduate, phase 2 is this, but then there's no, besides MyKIP, there's no goals attached to it, so then you can't monitor how you're doing. I mean, I could say, oh yeah, we're fostering curiosity of learning, and Paul could say, we're not, and then we really don't have any goals or data behind it, which is the piece that's missing, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yeah, these are not bad things. In fact, they're wonderful things. They just don't have an actionable plan with them.
Right.
So that's the goal.
Right.
Yeah.
All
You
right.
good?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna start with the first part, and this I'm not gonna have you thinking a whole lot just yet. I am going to ask you to do an activity here in just a second, but the first part is this idea of a portrait of a graduate or profile of a graduate. And This is really to, these are examples from different places. These are not, you know, selected for any particular reason. But these are examples. And these are graphics that, so that first document that I sent you is from the state of Washington. They had used that as one of theirs. The second one comes out of Moreno Valley Unified School District in California. This one's from Omaha, Nebraska. Like, there's a lot of places that have started to engage this work. But if you think about, when we're starting to talk about the profile of a graduate, we're really thinking about the competencies that young adults leave Novi Community School District with. So part of this is gonna dovetail with our, we've talked about SEL, character education pieces, but part of this is gonna dovetail with what types of competencies do we want kids to have? Do we want them to be collaborative processors? Do we want them to be empathetic? Do we want them to have grit and determination? Do we, you know, all of those types of things that are sometimes not always stated, we want to have something to kind of focus and anchor to. And so you can see where some of these districts have, these are just final examples of things that they've done. This isn't an exercise to try and copy or emulate them, but it just kind of gets you thinking along these lines. And so what my goal would be is that we will have some sessions, and I will also get some input from staff and others around these competencies. But in a conversation today with one of you, it was a great comment, you know, even asking what is industry looking for, right? So when we talk to employers in our community and beyond our community, what are they looking for? When we talk to college administration or admissions representatives, what are they looking for? You know, how do we best prepare for the world, our kids? And so when you think with the end in mind, these are those types of things. So of course, we want our kids to have the ability to read and write. That's great. But outside of, you know, the academic world, which is an important part of what we do, what are those other competencies that we really want kids to be able to have? So one of the original parts, and again, we talk about starting with the end in mind, is to try and think about what are those competencies or skills or attributes that kids that leave us would universally have. Because in districts that do this well, and again, when the strategic plan is done well, when you commit to those things, you notice a difference. You know, I graduated from Novi, and I have X trait. It's very, you know, understood. It was part of their educational experience when they were here for those 13 years. And that's an important part. So that's kind of what this exercise is, to try and think about, what do we want kids leaving us with? The reason that I like to start with this is because the rest of the strategic planning process is informed by that. Because really, right, if you want kids that have some of these things, then that's going to inform some of the goals, strategies, and activities that we do as a district. And so that's kind of the open idea of why this is often a good place to kind of start. And then it also gives us something to shoot for. So if you think about all the way down to kindergarten, we can be talking about some of those traits and skills and attributes that we're really trying to help all of our learners, you know, push towards. So this is mainly instructive and informative. We're gonna have a session on, you know, this particular piece, but I just wanted to kind of whet your appetite for it, let you think about that, ask any questions you have on that specific piece of it.
So is it,
So, whenever we go through something like this, like one goal is to have kids come out of our district with critical thinking skills. But what does that actually look like? Like, how do you teach a kid to have critical thinking skills?
Well, it can manifest in a lot of different ways, but like that is an example. That would be an example of a competency, but you'd want to define it. One of the things that's nice about this one from Omaha is that when they talk about being a critical thinker, they exhibit the ability to reason through and weigh evidence to make complex decisions. Those are some skills that can be taught. right? So when we sit into a class, do we look at our instructive model as to say, you're gonna sit there and just take in information? Or do we give you tools to actually debate and think critically and evaluate sources and actually think about the information you're reading and how do you know that it's true? How do you validate sources? This is actually increasingly important as we move into this world with AI, is what does the source tell us and where is that data set coming from? Those are all skills that are critical thinking skills. So you would want to quantify how that, what that skill set looks like and say what you mean, right? So when you say we want them to be critical thinkers, what does that mean? So I'm telling you that we could actually have skills that are taught to help kids be better critical thinkers, right? How to evaluate information when they see it. What do they do when they come against something that they don't necessarily know about or they don't agree with maybe in their worldview? How do they process that? You know, that's part of being a critical thinker, right?
And I think that maybe some of these things are already going on.
Oh, 100% they are. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a matter of finding what this looks like and pulling those and then maybe adding. Because I know when my kiddos do things, they'll look for resources and then I'll say, oh, how about this? And they'll flat out tell me, oh, that's not a resource that's
For sure.
reliable. And I'm
For
like,
sure.
oh, okay.
Or things that they've talked about that they've heard in a class where they had a discussion about a potentially sensitive topic, but they learned how to have that conversation, right? And so, to your point, Danielle, the idea here is there are a million positive things that happen every day in our classrooms. The real question is, what are the things that we want to make sure happen all the time for everyone?
But how would we differ from other districts in that respect? Everybody wants the same thing for their students, right?
Right, and so what happens is a lot of people enter, it's like the rudderless ship. We all want these things, but when you go after everything, you end up with nothing. And so the point is to try and really hone in. And I'm not saying critical thinkers needs to, if you don't pick critical thinkers, right, if you don't pick that as one of the competencies, that doesn't mean we think it's not important.
Right.
It just means that maybe like our intensive push, our focus is gonna be around these 8 other things or whatever that
Well,
is.
we have like Department of Education at the national level, I think we have one at the state too, right? They probably have these discussions, right? They're probably thinking, well, these kids, or nationally, these are our kids, right? At the state level is saying, these are our kids, this is what we would like our kids to do. So how do you align those goals at those other levels?
Well, I think there are a number. I mean, I just gave you 3 school districts that have them. The state of Michigan Department of Education has them, the national department. They have different things that they will suggest. I'll say this carefully. This is an opportunity for us as a team to really think about what do we feel are the most critical competencies with informed data from maybe employers and things like that. It's taking us through this exercise, but certainly it could be informed by some of the other models that are out there, right? Like you could look at, say, the state of Michigan, you know, they have some desired, they call them college career readiness standards. You could look at some of those things and say, you know, this seems to be something that would be a good fit for us, and we could use that as a way to inform some of the conversation.
So there are a universe of topics, right, that we can hone in. Is it what you see as a goal here, or as an outcome here, is to prioritize which ones we want to really hit for our kids?
Correct, because that will then help us actionably plan a strategic plan to help make sure that that happens.
So kind of similar to any successful organization, like they get known for something, like, without mentioning, if you think of a specific computer brand, you probably know what they stand for. Or a certain athletic team, different teams, even within the same sport, have a different feel. They'll run different offenses or defenses, and that's what they do, and they try and be great at that. So I think you're trying to help us to figure out, in general, what Novi students will be known for excelling at. They'll be
Yes.
hopefully well equipped in everything, but what are they what will they have a reputation in the outside world for really excelling at differentiating? And I'm just curious in general, does the profile of a graduate, does it have 6 empty boxes? Because I'm noticing all of these institutions have 6 traits.
No, I don't think I think you can find some that have 10, some that have 8.
The Michigan Department of Education.
I counted,
That's 5.
Yeah.
there's 6 on all of them.
I didn't do that on purpose, it just happened to be that way.
I was
but,
just wondering if we needed to think about 6 things specifically.
No, but I think you said it very well, that you're right. We wanna excel in everything. And I don't think it's in Novi out of the realm of possibility to say we wanna be great in everything. But you really see traction when you focus on a handful of things. And that's part of what we started working on with our staff this year, and we're gonna continue, is when we think about the initiatives that our staff have, they can't have 25 initiatives and do them well. Like, that's what leads to burnout, that is quite frankly what leads to poor performance. We are a great school district. This isn't saying we're gonna ignore everything else that's not in the eventual, documents, but to your point, it's about what are we going to say, these are gonna be our priorities for the next few years, we're gonna lean into these. We really wanna see if we can move us as an organization into this space where we're known for those things. And that is what great organizations do. And so it's really about taking us from, yes, we're very, very good in many, many things, but how do we move to the next level?
My comment is when we do the stakeholders and the kids and stuff, what we may think is important may not be what they perceive as, and it's not just the kids, I mean, it's other cultures and whatnot that we have in Novi here. I mean, so that really, when we did the big group thing, which was a lot of hand, but what the kids really wanted was completely different from a lot of the adults.
Yeah, and I think, I do my superintendent student advisory meetings, so I meet with the kids, and particularly at Meadows, but even all the way up to the high school, the things that they want are things like, can we do less iReady lessons, right, or things like that. And there's a valid point there, right? There's something in there that's saying, are we overusing that tool? But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to eliminate that because that's what they said that they wanted. But I think it gives us a voice into, maybe they're telling us that and they have a lot to say that's really important. So getting the students' voice into this will be important, but it's also not probably gonna be just the student voice or just the parent voice or just the staff voice. It's gotta be a collaborative, pulling together of everything, so.
I think that you probably find if you met with each of the groups separately, like I'm envisioning a whiteboard, that there might be 10 things from each group, but there will be probably 5 or 6 things that actually are the same.
Yep.
I think it'll be 6.
I think it might be 6. I was afraid to say 6,
Okay, now
because
it
I'm
can't be
committing to
6.
6.
So now it can't be 6, so, yeah.
I had a question about this process. Do we have any thoughts on like what Novi students are known for right now? Because I would be curious what that starts with, and then
She has a,
I mean, if we're talking about like, we'd like to have this, kind of set a standard of what we would like the perception of our students as a whole to be, I would be curious, like, where are we today? Because I feel generally like we are one of the top, if not the top, in our state. I think we are doing a great job at a lot of things already, and would like to see that portion continue. So instead of like reinventing the wheel, I feel like we kind of want to start with what are we already really good at, and then what do we want to work on? It's kind of where my
Yeah, no, I think you need that foundational data and information, and we have a lot of that, but that could even be another part of the data collection, is to say, when we're doing surveys or when we're building those instruments, to say, what do you feel you or we do very well right now, right? You know, there's gaps, there's pros and cons and all of those things, but we could probably glean some of that information.
And then the other thing I'm wondering is like, if you say to me, okay, what do you think is important for our students to have when they graduate? I mean, that starts with this like infinite possibilities of different things. Like one of these says, you know, like sustained wellness, right? Or, I mean, like, so I would not have ever thought like, oh, we should make sure everyone knows how to live healthy. Like, that's not a thing that I would have started with. And so I think it would be really interesting to me to see kind of like a list of kind of, you know, we grab 20 or 30 of these and we say, okay, here's all the points that they put, even if we don't do the full definitions. And then like, okay, which of these do we think are like, we definitely don't think this one applies? Or, okay, yeah, these ones have a little traction. And then kind of see like, if we started with kind of a list of options more so than just this realm of possibilities. It feels like there are too many choices, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I will help you.
The world has a lot of choices.
Yes, I will help
Mr.
you,
Raymond.
when we get into this, I will
There's a lot
help
of
you
choices.
through facilitation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just gonna say open-endedly,
Well,
but I.
the email you sent was fairly
Well,
open-ended.
I know,
and so
I do want you to start thinking about that, because some of you may have, some of you might be looking at these and like, this is exactly what I've been thinking about. Or some of you might say, I really think kids need to be prepared for certain digital citizenship piece, like maybe that's a thing. There are hundreds and hundreds of these possibilities that I will help you. I'm not gonna just leave it as a blank slate, but this is more the intro to what this is and why I like to start with it. And so that you can ask questions about it in concept, but I'm not asking you to pick the things right now, so.
Okay, and then I guess my last thought on that is just that this feels, in a certain capacity, like a somewhat impossible thing to determine, in that I do not believe that there's a one-size-fits-all for even just our goals for the students. And I guess the reason I'm saying that is like, I mean, we've talked, you and I, a bit about like our individual children that we have, and I feel like even for my own children, my goal of what strengths they have that I would want them to emphasize and utilize in their life, those things are different. And so I guess for me personally, and from like a parenting perspective, I feel kind of like I don't want the same skill set for a child who wants to go into trades that I do for someone who's trying to get into an Ivy League college. Like, those are separate things that you need to achieve those things. And so I guess there's kind of, in my mind, we have to consider, like, what is your goal? Because I think depending on what you're trying to do,
But maybe if you find the 6 things, they will be even for an Ivy League kiddo and a trade school. Like,
yeah,
maybe
that's
that
what-
is the goal.
It's such a variance of what.
That is maybe
You
the
can't-
goal, is to find things that would be.
You can't have the 64 Crayola box, you can only have the 8.
Okay.
I don't know if they're that dissimilar. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
like,
either.
you would want, regardless, like, what I would want for my child or any kid graduating here, what an employer would want is somebody who can figure out how to get the job done in faces of adversity, solve problems independently, those kind of things. I think those are necessary regardless of what career or occupation you choose in life, or even what life scenarios you encounter on. Like, there's certain things that I think we could focus on preparing our students for that would give them a better chance at being successful at whatever their natural abilities and desires tend to push them towards. And I think that's kind of, that would get at the character of what is a Novi graduate, regardless of where they wind up in life.
But you're saying solves problems independently, and like the first thing on this one is that they collaborate to solve problems. And so that in itself is not a thing that all of our students need to know how to do. Some of them will have jobs where.
Sometimes
but sometimes-
collaboration is how you independently solve a problem. If you have a problem, your boss says, go do this, or your foreman says, go do this, or whoever, and you're like, I don't have the skills for that, but I know, Frederick over here does. That's how you, but yeah, this
I
is
just think
the
like-
good discussion that we need to have, I just think.
Yeah, absolutely, because maybe it's not being collaborative is the thing you wanna
Yeah.
focus on. But it could be, right? So, you
But
know,
some people function very well in that circumstance, and other people are going to go into something like coding where they're gonna sit and do their thing, or, I know sometimes that's collaborative, but like, there's a lot of jobs where you work, just I do this
In-
task
in your own
versus,
mhm.
yeah,
The whole point of this is not to create clones coming out of Nova. It is to make it broad enough that each kid comes out individually with
A
basic
skill set.
skills and the skill sets to whatever we determine.
yeah.
You know,
To
whether-
adult well.
To kind
Do
of
you like-
circle back to what Paul just said and what Jason was saying too, I think if you were to think about, 7 years from now, we're talking to, Magna over here, and they said, I just keep hiring Novi graduates because they are so hardworking, like, they come across a problem and they don't ever quit, they just continue to push through. You're talking to then, 7 years from now, a University of Michigan admissions rep, and they say, we love to find Novi students because they absolutely are so open-minded, they think about the world around them in ways that a lot of kids coming to us don't have that experience. That's the point, is that there's some things that are universal that we would say, we really wanna prioritize these competencies so that our kids are leaving us in ways that allows for that to happen.
Okay.
So, it'll just give you an idea to think about. Obviously, it doesn't have to be 6, it might be 5 or 8 or whatever, it doesn't need to be a certain number, but the idea is that I want you to be able to have a discussion as a team about what those things might be, and I'll give you examples and data, and I'll have some things to make it, so when we get to that point, it's not there. Any other questions on that one? All right. This next one, I'm gonna try and do fairly quickly, but, this will be a start of something that I'll be doing with other stakeholder groups. So I'm gonna start by just asking a question. What do you think the difference is between values and beliefs? Yeah,
So values are things that can change based on your circumstances over time. Beliefs are something that's more constant.
okay. All right. Anybody else?
I'm trying to remember how you
I
explained it in
know,
the
I'm like-
interview.
Values
Circling back,
recall this.
circling back, yeah.
Yes, and I actually, it kind of was, I thought very well explained. But my recollection was that values, are kind of a more universal thing, whereas beliefs may have a little more to do with like the how. And like, I feel like when you talked about it before, my impression was more that like, our values might be that we all want whatever thing for our kids, and our beliefs might be which kind of, how we would do that is kind of in this space where I think
Yeah.
that might work.
So great recollection, and Jason's right, I think when you typically think about beliefs, they're things that are oftentimes unchanging, right? Like, I grew up in this type of setting, this has become my solidified worldview, whatever that is, so you have a perspective that's pretty, like, there's not a lot of success in people changing other people's beliefs. Values, though, are usually commonly understood to be positive. They come from kind of a positive presupposition. And so when you look at value-driven work, you can kind of bring people that have very different belief systems together around some common values. And so the goal is to start to have you start thinking about what values do you hold as really, really high priorities in your life. So I'm gonna give you
It's
a list.
very long
It
list.
is, you don't have to read every one, but
Pick 6.
all I'm gonna ask you to do,
100 here.
Only
I'm gonna
6.
ask you to just kind of take a few moments, and the goal is for you to put a little dot next to any of them that really resonate with you.
Oh, well, we're gonna do this now.
You're gonna go ahead and do that right now. So you're gonna put a dot next to any of these that really, really resonate with you.
getting a nice check because these tubes stick around.
Yeah, they're gonna participate.
Can we circle the ones we wish we were?
You can, that's extra credit.
Okay.
These are probably more things that you hold in very high regard, like these are, there's gonna be very few items on this list that you're gonna say, you know, I think, you know, responsibility is a terrible thing, right? But for some of you, that's not the thing that is really resonating with you as a top value, right? You might think that that's important, but not the most important. So, you know, you're gonna start by, and it doesn't matter how many you pick, you could have 20 of them for this first part, but you're just putting a dot next to the ones that you're like, wow, that one's really important to me.
You made them leave.
Thank you.
If we choose too many, will we get in trouble?
Not at all. Don't be bashful, pick the ones that you really like.
But you can't pick them all.
You could, but.
I
we're gonna-
choose
we are gonna-
all of them.
Is that saying cleanliness is supposed to be godliness or something like that?
Mhm.
Probably possible.
Yeah. Take another minute or two. Review the list. I will also add, these aren't the only values. If there's something that you don't find on the list that you think should be there, you can add it, of course.
We'll just have AI write our goals for us.
Alright, so if you'll indulge me, what I'd like you to do next is to put a check mark next to the top 10. Gotta narrow it down.
Twisting your marker like we're students. Not okay.
Does the top 10 have to have a dot?
I only picked 12, so.
Yeah, no, I only got 13, my lucky number.
We're gonna do 2 narrowings.
I picked 22, so
Uh-oh, I'm a little 22.
might have overshot it. You
That's
said I
fine.
could pick however many I wanted.
You could, that was the first part.
Directions weren't there.
Take about another minute or so. We'll give you extended time.
Gosh, it's so hard to count.
All right, so the next step, and we'll have Jason and Paul go together, and then you two go together, and then you two go together. You just stand up. What I'd like you to do is have a discussion, it's just a 2 to 3 minute talk, about what checked values you chose, share kind of why with your partner, and then circle the ones that are the same.
Oh, boy.
Boy.
Thank you.
I don't think I actually got to.
You go first.
I have communication,
Okay.
dependability, empathy, grace, honesty, love, spirit,
Cool.
spirituality,
All right.
passion, risk, and trust.
Very nice. I think all those
So,
are,
So you had
Yeah, that's,
curiosity.
how we landed.
what do you?
yeah,
First column, I have 1.
I put balance.
Okay.
Okay. Empathy.
okay,
That was
we
not a
both
check.
have
I moved that one over.
okay.
I family.
So that one was the same.
You know, I have family,
Oh,
but I
fair
didn't think of it as,
Generosity.
Well, you know what, like I said, I try to
Gratitude.
spread my
Leadership.
Yeah.
Almost made it.
Patience.
You got what I'm saying.
Professionalism.
Trust there, I said, that's it.
Spirituality.
oh, we got that one.
Or truth.
Peace,
You can be spirits.
I chose trust.
And
Just
under-
interesting.
and understanding.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
that's
it's
really
really
good.
trust.
I
Yeah.
think
Where's
that
your
would be
grade?
good.
So,
Yeah.
it seems like we
That
have
well.
curiosity and humility in common.
I like a lot of
So-
them, but there was some books, like, I wish I was this.
I feel like
think some of them
it's
are
generally
work on
my
I know.
values that
I
I
know.
time tends
So I
to
think
be,
we
Okay, there's some funny ones. some
like
good
I
ones
thought
in here.
bravery is really important, because
So I
that,
have
Well, like
bravery,
it's
but
sort of,
bravery's very
I mean,
I feel like
that's.
that's
courage.
similar to how you
I
like
can't
vision
do
in my mind, because brave, I think when people are brave, they try different things. they
Beauty, well, that's
go
what
outside
it's,
the norm.
you know, right.
The absence of
There was
fear.
some other ones in here that I was like, oh, I wish I did that
And thinking
more.
about
There was
the.
a lot
I
here
have,
on me,
I have
actually.
charities
Talk about
that
that
they
for
make
times.
I went through this list, and I was like, what do I
There's like
continue
a lot
to
of
tell
different ways you
myself?
can be brave.
No, I didn't have
So I
charity,
thought
but I
that
had
was good.
generosity,
Empathy is
so
one.
along the same
Very,
lines,
very
yeah.
close.
Gratitude, because it's,
Depending
feel
on
like
I
it
have.
doesn't matter what you have.
Community, I almost
Appreciate
wondered
it,
when I
grateful
thought,
for what it is.
Well, you know, that's not, you know,
And then I like honesty,
yeah, I think
Well, I
if I
have
put it on,
overlays.
then maybe I'm not being humble.
which.
That's why I struggled with it.
I feel like that's kind of
I'm like,
comparable.
okay, I don't know
So,
if
so
that's
you
gonna
really
work.
did, you really, you know, did that one. Of course, I
Yeah.
have.
Well, like that
And I was
is
gonna put love,
a pure form of drive.
Yeah, I feel like those are kind of like the same. When I had growth.
right, where's the love to
Yeah,
you?
Loyalty,
Like, I had optimism, I like.
Oh,
that.
that's a nice one, I don't have that one as much as I should.
and then I added like
passion,
next
I mean,
week,
that's
I
just,
was
you find
I know, right?
something
It's kind of
you're
tricky.
passionate about.
That's
Like
true.
you would be too.
But they know the answers are.
I'm not passionate about tea
Right.
though, I know that
That's the
surprises
part of
you.
this, there's not,
But I'm not.
not an answer.
I love my job, but it's not my passion.
That's like a,
It's really not.
Travel is not.
Take another minute or so.
there were some other ones that I was
Trust
surprised
is,
with.
discussion.
Yeah, I
I would
put
understand
that, I didn't put for my title, but.
So we have, at
professional.
the end of the
And
day,
risk, that's
both,
right.
both
That's
very,
something like a lot
Well,
of
it's not me,
people that I work with
but
seem to not
I've read a
couple
lot of things about it.
have a good
Probably
sense
comes
of
from
risk,
some
but I don't know that it's like a core value.
I wish I was more risky, that's one of the ones I wish I was more. I put intuitive, but then I was between, when I had to cross one out, I was between intuitive and spirituality. And
Yeah,
I'm
like
more
me
spiritual
as
than
a
I am
human.
intuitive, but I am
Yeah.
very intuitive, so I was like, had to cross one
So
of
we
them
had
out.
two the same, so that's good.
We felt were important for students.
Famous, I was gonna, but I already
You know,
knows
it could
that,
be
so it
either
doesn't
way.
really
Most
matter.
people, most
Right,
people.
because I
said
said
famous.
Most people have them as the same. Right? So like if
Fearlessness,
you're
that's
really
good too.
passionate about
Cleanliness, that's true, that's important.
then you want that to be
Somewhat,
a
my
value
lovely
that our
husband
students
started
share, or that our staff
as
shares. I
president.
think it tends to be
Oh, he
the
did?
same.
Well, July 1st is
We have
not,
found
but he,
that we have different words
I asked him, I
for
said,
a lot of
"So how was
similar
your
Yeah, it's like you were saying, there's a lot of
you
synonyms.
know, he goes, you
Yeah.
know, I'm an excellent manager.
Okay, so
And I was just like, oh,
I'm
my
gonna-
God.
because it's an open session board meeting, I'm gonna give you the out to say you prefer to pass. But what I would love it is, I'm gonna catalog the 10 that you individually chose, and part of why I like this activity is because it helps your colleagues on the board understand a little bit more about maybe where you're coming from. So, you know, whoever would like to go first, and then we'll just go around. I'm gonna actually jot down the ones that you let me know. So, you wanna go first, Jason?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to highlight the ones we happen to have, Paul and I happen to have?
That'll come last, so, yep.
Go through your text.
Alright, so I had bravery, curiosity, empathy,
I think a lot of people couldn't have
equity, cause I added my
Okay.
own. Gratitude, hope, humility, kindness, loyalty, and trust.
Thank you for sharing.
that. Okay, so we did Paul and Danielle,
All right,
which one?
Paul, do you care to share, or do you wanna pass?
Here, I'll go. Balance, curiosity. It's already on there.
Sorry. I'm gonna do a little. Oh, that's not gonna
You
help.
might wanna try a different color. Try a
You need
different
an
color.
assistant up there.
I should, that's a good point. I'm gonna use a different color.
With the colorblind guy, you choose a different color.
Colorblind guy, you choose a different color. Okay?
Determination. Humility.
Did you say
Humility?
Humility,
Yep, that's another one of these.
okay?
Individuality. Integrity. Persistence.
That would be Paul.
Reverence. Truth. And wonder.
Thank you. Betsy.
Okay, I had bravery. And then confidence.
Help me out too, if you do one that's up here, I can check it.
Okay, empathy is on there. Ethical. Growth. Honesty. Kindness. It's on there at the bottom. Persistence, also on there. Reflective. Toughness and trustworthy.
Thank you.
Community. Empathy's up there. Empathy,
Empathy,
fairness. Innovation. Knowledge.
do we have innovation? No. Knowledge.
Openness. Peace. Sincerity. And then, transparency. I think we have trust up there. Second column.
Thank you. You good? Are you ready?
Yeah. Communication. Dependability. Empathy's already up there. Grace. Honesty. Oh, see, I missed that one. Love. Passion. Risk. Spirituality, which I think is, no, not up there, okay. And trust, which is,
Which is
there's
up there.
trustworthy, just, oh, truth, trust, there we go, yes.
Thank you.
Balance.
That's on the second.
Yeah. Second, there we go. Empathy.
Family. Generosity. Gratitude.
It's in the first column.
Fifth one down.
Leadership.
That's what I'm president.
mutuality and understanding.
Okay. So this gives you kind of a macro level look at what, and again, this is a short exercise, this isn't all encompassing, what you as a board have kind of said for you, each as individuals, kind of felt like those were your key ones. You see some overlap, which is really good. The last part is to look at your sheet. Betsy's gonna hate this, but I'd like you to put a star next to the values that you are in your top 5. You're only allowed to pick 5. The final narrowing.
Oh, that's gonna be, throw in my little green pen, thank you very much. Okay, okay, get rid of that one. We'll keep that one.
This is very difficult.
Do you need a little more time?
Including my APs.
What?
It's like, yeah. You-
I'm over here picking all of them, if you're talking about your AP. Pretty sure I should have them for this.
Are you done? Yeah. Okay. Willie, if it's okay with you, we're gonna start with you, and you're gonna just tell me the ones that I'm starring.
Okay, empathy. Fairness. Honesty. Openness. And trust.
Thank you. All right, Mary Ann?
Dependability. Empathy, will ya? Grace. Spirituality. And trust.
Danielle?
This was very hard. Empathy. Family. Generosity. Patience. And professionalism.
Jason?
Empathy, equity, gratitude, hope, and loyalty.
Paul?
Balance, curiosity, persistence, and truth.
That's it.
I'm just going to first register my discontent with selecting.
You want
Bravery.
some- Right, okay.
I agree.
It's like in playing baseball under protest.
Empathy. Honesty. Kindness. And ethical.
Okay. So perfect world now, what I'd like you to do is, before we kind of close this activity out, different partners, so you two, you two, you two. Talk about what your ahas were in seeing this. You can talk about what you thought was going to happen, you can talk about what you didn't like about the activity, you can talk about what you can talk about what you learned, maybe about a colleague. But I'd like you to kind of say, what does this tell you, if anything? Okay? Have that conversation for a couple minutes.
Okay, so what are your thoughts?
So, I'm surprised that pretty much universally everybody settled around empathy. I think that's probably gonna be one of those profiles of a student, it looks like. I was actually
Oh, you really
very,
want to
I shouldn't say surprised, but I thought it was really, it was good to see that family so important. Because that was unique to you, but it's obviously it was your first cut, your second cut, your third cut. So I'm really grateful to see this exercise because I would have not necessarily sussed
Yeah, I
it.
feel like there's a lot of them that are pretty
But I think now that I know that, I think it puts a lot of things into
even
perspective
like
and
where
it
we
makes sense. So
put things,
I think like this exercise
you know,
was
with different
really to
words,
see
I
like
feel like
what
a lot of
really,
this.
really mattered. We had to really cut down.
Yeah.
I think that, I love the exercise
Well,
because as
ethical
people are giving their,
like in the way that I'm thinking about being
I
ethical.
can visually like see their personalities.
Yeah, so I think it's a really
I love
interesting
that you made
list,
up
and
your
I'm
own word.
very surprised.
I do,
The
because I
range
was I was
and the stuff
thinking
that
when
other
I was
people
looking
pick
through
that I
them, like, is it on there?
Blue pass, because I did pick a lot of them.
Not the same.
But
So I love that you made up your
So
own word
what,
and that you
um,
stuck with it, because that
what were your
is
top five?
who you are.
I had to write mine separate, but.
I'm really surprised that
See, I liked that one a lot, but I just get.
in both the 10 and the 5, I don't know why I'm surprised by it. I just think out of all the words that we could have all chose, I think that was kind of crazy.
He has like the next closest is trust
Well, yeah.
and honesty.
Right. Which are almost
Yeah.
similar words, yeah.
I want to describe someone as
It's
great.
funny because, like, I think generosity is always go-to top 5, but I was debating between generosity and gratitude. And I think they're similar but different, you know, so there was a lot of that. I think as a board as a whole, we're good people, right? And then finding where we're similar is amazing. I took a picture, I should take another picture. And then finding where we're different is still
Yes,
pretty
that
cool,
was
because
one
then
that
you
I
can start to
considered
understand like people's values and where they're
that was
coming
one of my
from in
top
their
10
decision-making process. And not
But,
necessarily disagree with them, because then
so I
it out to
had
something
bravery,
that we wouldn't
and then
say like, oh, that's awful, like, they're
yes.
kind, or they're generous, or they believe in equity,
To
or
me, like the reason I picked these are more,
truthful, or
like I feel like
balance.
in all the things that we endeavor to do.
I always thought of myself as a balanced person, but when it came down to really narrowing it down and selecting 5, it took me this, which was interesting to find about myself.
I also thought it was interesting what didn't make the cut for your person.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a really
as opposed to
important thing to
what
try to teach
did.
kids.
And I also think that this,
You know, hey, this is weird, we're gonna
so
do
earlier
this.
when Ben said it's between beliefs and values, I remember that.
And then just generally like the empathy thing and trying
But I
to
think
see.
this exercise shows that values do fluctuate over time.
I think when we
Because
talk
the
about
values that I would have had for
trustworthiness
myself
and all those
as
things, I think everybody agrees that that's
are
like
not the
definitely.
same now, and they've change because I pretty
Take
much.
one more minute.
What am I trying to pass?
Wrap up your
Yes.
conversation.
Those are better.
Like maybe they were, really.
But they're slightly different, some of the same, but they're slightly different.
And I feel like just generally, like as a human, trying whatever possible.
It's interesting you say that, because that's why balance was after the cut.
And I should have put on the did it generosity.
Balance was like probably at the top of my list, it would have been my number one.
I'm sorry, what was the
That's
goal?
the thing I like in the last several years.
My
I've
family
focused on
and
versus
balancing.
like,
Oh,
well,
well,
generous
for you to discuss
interpretation.
what this whole
Serving in my community and now with my kids
Oh, well.
leaving, balance isn't as important because I'm not pulled in so many different directions, and that's why I took it off. But I was, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, it would never come off, it would have been the number one.
Do you feel like?
Right, yeah, and I think for me, like generosity and empathy are pretty comparable values in a weird way, because my thought on like
Maybe not as a
generosity
child.
is like always assuming.
Right, which is also
Probably
very
reasons
interesting, but my own kids in
You know,
my
those kind of things. I
current
think
like
that's to be
family unit,
Trying to be as compassionate.
I think that if you would have asked me this as like a younger version of
Oh, I
myself, it
I
would
don't
be
think it's
on
very
there,
fair
but
that you
it
didn't
wouldn't
have
have
to
definitely
participate.
risen to the top 5.
That's a funny point,
That's
because
true, maybe I did
in
too.
elementary school, we.
I'll have to add mine. I'll do
How
mine with the staff.
often do the first
Pick 3 things.
10,
and describe
12
it.
end up with stars?
Not very often.
You
Right.
said 11 there.
Right.
Of the 11 first things
So
that
they
you
were
mentioned.
easy.
Especially with
They were
6
harder.
people,
Some of them didn't
7
second
people to
grade,
have
And none of them made
You
the
know.
final.
Wow,
5
So I thought
stars
that
on
was very
one.
interesting.
But
that is interesting that you can picture
Should
Mount
be-
Shield or know what it was,
I
and
know
then now,
exactly what it looks like.
and now they're
Well,
not.
that's-
And none of those things
Kind of a
made it.
buzzword
Bravery was the
lately.
closest. but
It's an important
very
one.
interesting.
Yeah.
What is,
All
what
right.
I valued as a kid is not the same.
So,
Fun exercise to do with your own family.
before I kind of
Right?
Yes.
With your
say a
children.
couple things in,
With-
in
with
closure on this, what are, anything that anyone would like to share about the activity, anything that was an aha, anything that you'd like to share about, anything you saw out there? Yeah.
So I think the conversation that Danielle and I ended on was probably the most interesting. We kind of slowly walked towards it, but I realized in the first cut, I remember distinctly we had to do a family crest for a social studies project in like 4th or 5th grade. And I remember making a red T-Rex on a blue motorcycle, and it was supposed to symbolize strength, smartness. I don't know why a T-Rex is smart, but smartness and what was it?
Bravery.
Bravery. And those all made the first cut. Only one made the second, and none of them made my final.
Huh.
And I think that's a good example of how values can shift over time.
Yeah, for sure. Great point. Anybody else? Yeah.
One thing I noticed is that, well, most of us thought empathy was really important, and I think, okay, so it's kind of generally a pretty common thing. But aside from that, when I look at, some of these different values, so many of them overlap. And I think that, I mean, like, I had honesty, but, truth is on there, trust is on there, and like, these are all, you know, in my mind, very comparable.
Yeah.
Or fairness, and I have ethical, which were like also, to me, like, as I was listening, I'm like, okay, a lot of these are synonyms. And so I think that even though everyone on this board is very different in what I would say, like, if you had to say, like, okay, everyone's gonna make this list, I would not have predicted as much overlap. And so it's really interesting to me to see that even though I think we all think about things differently and approach things differently, I think we have a lot more similarity in these big picture things, which
Yep.
is really a great place to start. So this is a good activity, even though I complain
Yeah.
about it.
Well, I appreciate it. I will try and facilitate better next time.
You should definitely participate.
But I really appreciate your willingness to kind of dig in. I know it's late. One thing I will say is that I agree with a lot of what was said. I would encourage you to take a picture of this before you leave, just because it will serve as kind of a foundational, just be interesting to see what your colleagues on the board think. Imagine if you had a data set that had several thousand responses to this activity, and you started to be able to narrow down, what do parents in this district value, right? What do students in this district value? What do staff in this district value? And you started to be able to kind of come and pull some of those together. Then you would be able to compare that to what you guys picked and see then you now have some data to make some decisions about what do we believe are our foundational values as a district, right? And so part of these don't have to be the final be-all, end-all. You'll have more as we get into that, but when we start getting into vision, mission, values, values are a great place to start. We also have some preliminary data here, but we're also gonna get more to add to it, and that's gonna be, I hope, fun as strategic planning is, process, but also something that helps you get to be able to collaborate a little bit and think about some of these things as we do them, not just around our values, but also about how do we wanna get at solving some of the problems and what are our goals and what are our big picture alignments. So appreciate you digging in. Looking forward to doing more of this in the near future, and more to come. Thank you. Yeah,
Thanks for facilitating.
absolutely.
You had your teacher hat on there.
I did.
I know. Sorry.
Anytime he has a whiteboard, he turns to a teacher like that.
I do, I'm sorry.
Alrighty, we just need a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
We have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Mishner and supported by Mrs. Bowdwine. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, everybody, and thanks to our audience, public, for being here tonight. And I hope that you gathered some good information about yourselves and about your fellow board members. So, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
I think you need to make